right, welcome to yet another fabulous Linux Zoo crew, and today it is the attack of the show hosts. We have a number of topics that we are going to be discussing today, but before I begin, I would like to share a few words with you from our founder, Voltam.
Hi, I'm Voltam, founder of the Linux Distro community. The Linux Distro community is a place for people to hang out and discuss Linux distros, software, and open source. The Linux Distro community is a community funded by its members for its members. We are a friendly, welcoming community that encourages people who use Linux operating systems and software to share their passion and knowledge with other people. We believe that when people share information freely, everyone benefits. Our community is also a great place for people who have been using Windows and have been thinking of making the switch to a Linux operating system, a place where they can benefit from the sharing of knowledge. Linux operating systems and software developers have given us all the ability to choose from hundreds of free Linux-based operating systems and thousands of free programs. The least we can do is freely share our knowledge and share with others our experience whilst using this software. If you are using Windows right now and have had enough of all the viruses, spyware, malware, and are thinking, there must be a safer way to use the internet. Please consider using a free Linux operating system today. There are many to choose from. Ubuntu, Linux Mint, Pingai OS, and Zorin OS are just some of the more popular, easy-to-use operating systems. And for the person who wants more of a challenge from their Linux experience, there is also Arch Linux. Millions of people only use their PC for internet, social networking, voice and video chat, and email. If they only knew that you can do all that on a Linux operating system safely and securely, that's where a community like ours comes in. Not only are we passionate about Linux operating systems and free software, we want other people to feel the freedom that we do when we use our computers. This is all part of a bigger picture, that as humans, we are rewarded by helping others. We were born to share and promote freedom. We'd love to see you become a part of the Linux Distro community. You can voice chat with us on Mumble or text chat with us in IRC. Head over to linuxdistrocommunity.com for details. Join in today in the sharing of knowledge and the freedom that a Linux operating system gives people. Thank you.
All right, and before we begin, I would like to pass the microphone over to our co-host, Pingcasts.
Thank you, Spatry. Today, Zoo Crew will be featuring Oscalit, QUIDSUP, Spatry, Techman, the Linux Guy, Edward, myself, Setkeh, and Toss today. Hope you enjoy yourselves and get ready for an attack of the Linux show host. I'm going to pass the mic back to Spatry.
All right, and we've got a lot of hot topics that we are going to discuss today. One of the newest topics that just came out, everybody knows that the GIMP has just released version 2.8. They have now switched over to a single user interface that you can choose optionally, of course, and Oscalit's going to go ahead and start us off with that.
Yeah, I've been using GIMP for a very, very long time now. I'm a professional photographer, as I'm pretty sure I've mentioned in the past, so image editing is something I do like every single day of my life. I'm quite impressed with 2.8. I've been using it since the beta of 2.7, so I've been using that series, which is the beta and alpha versions of 2.8, and I've been impressed the whole way throughout. The big thing, of course, is the single user interface. It's a godsend. However, I do have one fault in them. They have it set, so on default it has the 3 panels, so you have to go up and change the settings. But it's not very hard. You just go up and click the Windows tab, and you can go single Windows mode, which is the best option in my opinion. It's fast, stable, and it's going to be better than Photoshop. It's already better than Photoshop because 1, it's free, and 2, I can do everything I can do in Photoshop and more.
The only drawback that I see to this is the fact that if you're used to using programs like Photoshop or even Fireworks in my case, you know, finding those commands that you're used to using are a little bit harder. Now, I had a chance to play with the new GIMP yesterday, and I even did just a short little video review on it. I like the single the single application window layout of it, and now it's just a matter of taking the time to actually, you know, learn the different commands and, you know, Pretty much, it's like learning how to use a new piece of software all over again. Now, I'd like to pass the microphone over to QUIDSUP. He said he had a chance to look at this, I believe.
Had a quick look today. I didn't realise initially about the single window where you had to set the option, but once I did it, it's looking good. I never really liked the separate interface where you got the two bars on either side. I'd always end up closing the wrong one. So anything that makes my life simpler, it's all good to me.
Edward.
Yeah, they've done a really nice job with the 2.8 issue of GIMP. They've added their own little nice effects like canvas text editing and multi-column dock windows. And then there's a new set of brushes as well, and they've also probably done some bug fixes and all that lot. It is, like you say, it is a pain to have to go to Windows, click on Windows, and then go on to single window mode. That should really be set by default, but like you say, as long as you make people aware, then people will be looking at your channel and taking your advice.
Awesome. I like the idea of being able to have a single windowed mode because I personally find it annoying to have all these different windows open.
As Spatry was saying there, he wants to learn it, and at the moment he finds it a bit difficult. And that is the thing about image editors. There's no way to make it easy, but by introducing this new feature of the single windows, it makes things easier for people who are brought up with Photoshop. I mean, I've heard of no lessons at my local college that teach how to use the GIMP. It's how to use Photoshop. That's what they teach. So if you're taught how to use Photoshop, you're pretty much used to that one single design. And now if you have the option to use a free piece of software, you have the same layout, so you're used to it. So it makes things a lot easier for people. That's what I find anyway. It's great. They've actually listened to people. People have wanted it, and they've listened.
Setkeh.
Well, I actually haven't had a chance to play with the new GIMP yet, but in my personal opinion, and I was taught how to use Photoshop, I actually prefer on dual screens to have the split windows, especially with my tablet. And because my screen resolution isn't all that fantastic, and having both screens at different resolutions, it makes life a lot easier for me to have on my bigger screen the actual editing window, and then having the other, like the paintbrushes and all that other stuff on the other screen. And navigating around with the tablet becomes a lot easier as well. So I'm not 100% sure what everyone's on about with the, I learned how to use Photoshop, so GIMP's hard, but, that, in my opinion, that's how I like the GIMP, and I like the GIMP for having those split panels over Photoshop just being one single window taking up too much real estate on a single pane.
So at least you have a choice. You can have the multiple windows, or you can have a single user interface. But the thing is, I think most of the people that I've spoken with would prefer to have the application in the form of a single user interface. But it's all about choice at the end of the day. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to our next topic. And this next topic, we're going to talk about the pros and cons of Ubuntu 12.04. And Total OS Today and QUIDSUP have had plenty of opportunity to use the new Ubuntu 12.04, as they are both running these on their main machines. Let's start with you, Total OS Today, and then afterwards I'm going to pass the microphone over to QUIDSUP.
Thank you, Spatry. Yeah, in a word, Ubuntu 12.04, in a word, impressive, and of course stable. I've had this installed in my older laptop, a Centrino M, and really since Alpha 2, and I normally don't like to mess with alphas and betas, especially for new dual booters. It just wouldn't be smart. But for myself, since Alpha 2, wow, it has the look and feel of quality. It looks great, it functions great. Now, I haven't tested every single piece of software. The only glitch I found, everything seems to work terrifically. The only thing in the multimedia, and I think Linux perhaps needs to catch up. I was trying to transfer some DV video of me and my boy from an old DV cam using the FireWire, and I downloaded, I think it's called Kino. I got it working, and it's fine. But besides that, I dare say, now, let me say this first before I can say this. my laptop has an Intel graphics card, okay, and that's all I'm going to say on that. But at least on my laptop with that specific graphics card with Ubuntu 12.04 and me casually playing with a lot of the software, not every single piece, but at least with what I've seen and how it's been stable for me, I think Ubuntu 12.04 probably sets the new standard of quality for a mom and pop Linux-based operating system. I love it.
QUIDSUP.
Yeah, so I got around to installing Ubuntu 12.04 at last. I was a bit annoyed really, I was almost forced down this route when my 11.10 installation broke up. I think it was just completely overwhelmed with the amount I'd installed on it over the past 6 months. And I know at one point I had over 100 gigabytes in the recycle bin, so whoops, not surprised it broke. Anyway, my experiences with 12.04, initially I was quite impressed with it, thinking, oh yeah, the speed is brilliant, they've done a really good job here. And I started actually using the system, and I'm thinking, hang on, some of the things I used to do in 11.10 seemed a lot easier, and some of the effects you had in Unity, like the dodge windows effect, and also some of the colours, it just seemed a lot better in 11.10, so I've had to look at alternatives there, and got most of it now. But the big problem I noticed is if you install the GNOME Classic desktop, or even the GNOME Shell desktop, it causes massive stabilisation issues with the NVIDIA and the applications. And, you know, it was like a completely different system after I put on the GNOME desktop. It was crashing, or it crashed immediately on boot up, and then every couple of applications would crash. But as soon as I realised, I thought, right, I'll start again. This time don't install the GNOME desktop, and it's actually been pretty good. There's a couple of other problems I've had getting the screencasting going, but now that's sorted, actually it turns out the screencasting's coming out a lot better in 12.04.
Total OS today.
Yeah, I'm sorry Quids had some issues. Again, let me restate what I said, and I'm not trying to be funny, but my laptop has an Intel graphics card. I tested Kazam Screencaster, it works fine. I do have, I think I have GNOME Shell installed, you know, and I'm able to log out and log in. I think I even have Cinnamon, and it seems fine. But then again, I have the Intel graphics card, and it seems that history has shown, and maybe you guys can correct me, history has shown that Linux seems to prefer Intel graphics cards. And maybe that's the disclaimer that we should say, that if anybody has ATI or NVIDIA and not Intel, you may run into issues, at least until the rest of the software and drivers updates catch up with the core operating system itself. But in my laptop, and it's an old one, look, it's outdated, but it works, it's stable, excuse me, and I've been thoroughly impressed.
Linux guy.
Yeah, Ubuntu's really doing well. It kind of is a little bit unstable at times, but if you work around the stability things, then you're fine. Also, what I really hit hard on Ubuntu 12.04 is its lack of a task manager, and that really bothers me. I mean, it really bothers me out. It just is, you know. I mean, when you're you know, doing things like well, when a program crashes, I mean, you can't really go to a task manager to, you know, to close that program like you can in Windows. But there are a couple of good things about Ubuntu 12.04, and it has pretty good stability overall. Probably like, I mean, programs are pretty stable 80 to 85% of the time.
All right, and a tip I have for you, Linux guy, is you could install HTOP and run that from a terminal, and then you would have a quick and easy to use task manager where you can kill any programs that are misbehaving. Setkeh, your turn.
Okay, so I haven't had much to do with Ubuntu itself, but I have been playing a lot with Edubuntu since our show on Ubuntu last week, I think it was. And I've been looking at it from the administration perspective, so seeing how easy it would be for someone that isn't very Linux handy to walk in with an Edubuntu CD, stick it in a computer like a teacher or you know, something like that, stick it into a computer and set up things like LTSP for which is Linux Terminal Server Protocol, for setting up things like thin clients in a classroom, all this sort of stuff. And I've actually found it to be incredibly simple. The installer pretty much does everything you need it to straight off the bat. The only things that I've really had trouble working with in Edubuntu is making things invisible to the thin clients. So things like the settings for the machine, for a start. Also, like hiding things like the terminal and stuff like that, because you don't want your students getting in there and messing around. Or even just restricting them right back to, you know, a few very, very basic commands. But besides that, and the few odd crashes here and there, everything seems to be really well, and I think they've done a really good job with 12.04.
All right, now, Riley had mentioned that he had an issue with installing the Kubuntu desktop and really bad overheating and that sort of thing. Now, it is my understanding the last conversation that we had with Mr. Pope when we had the Ubuntu show on the Zoo Crew, that they've actually made some improvements on that. Now, my recommendation in a case like that is if you really want to run a KDE desktop with Ubuntu is actually installing the Kubuntu operating system, just backing up your home directory so that you have all your settings and that sort of thing, and then just restoring your home directory back once you have Kubuntu properly installed. Techman, you're next.
Yes, Spatry. Thank you. I have been using Lubuntu 12.04 since it came out, and I upgraded to it. And I must say that it is pretty stable. I haven't had any real issues with it, except that my login manager changed, which I think was a fault of myself, not knowing which login manager it used. I think that was my fault, but my SSH and my FTP server still run even from outside of the actual user environment, so when it comes up asking me to log in, my SSH and FTP still work just fine for me.
Now, something to keep in mind, folks, the Ubuntu 12.04 just released. This is a long-time release product, and it is my understanding that there are going to continue to be updates to this to improve reliability and stability on this operating system. After looking at this myself, I feel that Ubuntu is definitely heading in the right direction. There have been a lot of improvements to the Unity interface. I feel it is a lot more usable, and it is welcoming to people who, you know, want to try an alternative to Windows. And Oscalit, you're next.
As everyone kind of knows, I'm not a big fan of Ubuntu, but that is for one reason. I am an advanced user. For beginners, Ubuntu is the best thing since sliced bread. It's got everything you'd ever need in there by default. It's got your browser, your text editors, everything you ever need. As an advanced user, though, I think Ubuntu is overly bloated. And that's the only downside I can really give it, because it does have a great community that has lots of questions already answered. So if you have a problem with Ubuntu, I can guarantee you someone else will already have had that problem and you can sort it out, which I think is the great thing about Ubuntu as a desktop computer operating system, is the fact that you have the information sitting for you. It's what makes Linux great for the beginners. It's what gets people interested in it and gets them using it.
Exactly. Now, something I'd like to point out, because when I started using Linux and I decided to switch over, you know what? Every problem that I had with Linux was easily answered on Ubuntu's forums. And, you know, just simply using a Google search, I would just simply type in Ubuntu and what my problem was, and I would always find an answer. 95% of the time, a solution to the problem that I was experiencing. And that is a wonderful thing about the community, because there are people that spend a lot of time on those forums answering newbie questions. It helped me to learn, and that's one reason why I decided to make this level of a contribution to the community myself, because when we share with one another, as Voltim has always said, everybody benefits. And I really love what Ubuntu has done for the Linux community, and it is my hope that we will see many more innovations and new improvements coming to the table. All right, well, let's go ahead and move on to our next topic, and this one is from Setkeh, and he's going to talk about servers and L.A.M.P. And before we go into that, I'd like to explain to you guys what L.A.M.P. really is. And basically, L.A.M.P. is an acronym for a solution stack of free open source software, referring to the first letters of Linux, Apache HTTP server, MySQL database software, and PHP. Why don't you start us off on that topic, Setkeh?
Okay, so I get a lot of questions about servers on IRC. I get emails about it every now and then too, and I get a few comments on YouTube as well, and private messages there as well, asking me what exactly is needed to run a server. And essentially, the easiest way of putting it is any machine can be a server. You don't need to go out and buy blades and rack drawers and all this really expensive stuff. Anything can be a server. It depends on what you really want to do. If you just want to host your own website, then you can get away with very easily a machine with an old machine with maybe a 2-3 gigahertz processor, well, even lower than that. Maybe 1.5 gigahertz processor and 256 megabytes of RAM, because L.A.M.P. really doesn't use that much resources as far as CPU and RAM goes, depending on the server load, of course. I mean, if you're getting smashed by 1 million users a day, then you're probably going to find it to be a little bit inadequate. But on a general rule, it is quite possible to run a website that's getting a decent. I reckon you could probably take about 100 hits to, 100 hits to 500 hits an hour on that sort of hardware. And essentially, the process of installing and configuring L.A.M.P. is making sure that all the software can talk to each other. Essentially, I mean, you've got to make sure that Apache can see the PHP and MySQL libraries, and you've got to make sure that PHP can see the MySQL libraries as well, and make sure that Apache has all the right prefixes for if you're programming in PHP, that if you have a file called index.php, that Apache knows that that's exactly the same thing as having an index.html, index.xhtml, or whatever. The process of setting up the server is really quite simple, and it doesn't matter what distro you're on. There's usually pretty good documentation for that distro. But if you really can't find anything, I really do suggest the L.A.M.P. article in the Arch Wiki, because it's fantastic. All the commands should be pretty much the same. The only variation would be obviously package management, if you're not using Arch, and maybe some of the directory structure might be a little bit different. As a general rule, everything should be almost exactly the same. The other thing I wanted to cover as well, and because I've seen a few questions on this as well, is sharing folders across a network, either via like just a normal computer, a laptop, or a server. Because I've got shared folders on my servers and my NASs and all that sort of stuff. A lot of people have the misconception that Samba is the only way to share files on a network. While Samba is, without a lot of mucking around, Samba is the only way to share files on a network if it's a Windows network. Because Samba is pretty much the protocol that Windows uses for sharing documents over a network. But if you're going into a Linux environment where 95% of your machines are Linux or more, you'll probably want to use NFS, which is Network File System. Basically what it does is it creates a share that you can then mount that. It's either a folder or a complete drive, and you can mount that drive to any number of computers all at once, which is also possible with Samba, but NFS does it a lot more efficiently, and there's not as much overhead because there's no having to change for different protocols and all that sort of stuff. So if you're just sharing between Linux machines, then NFS is definitely the way to go. But if you have to share between Windows machines and Linux machines, then you're obviously going to need Samba.
All right, now there have been a lot of really, really good comments that have come in as you were speaking, and I have a question I would like to ask myself about running a server, because for somebody like me, you know, I've never set up a server, and Linux is definitely the way you want to go if you wanted to run a server from your home. Okay, first, let me read to you some of the comments that have been mentioned on IRC, and then I'll move on to my question for you, Setkeh. OptiChip mentioned that he would recommend using good hardware if you're going to be building a server that is good to be accessed via people on the internet. You want a machine that is responsive. And then High6 went on to say Raspberry Pi. And then, of course, QUIDSUP went on to say that Raspberry Pi would struggle. So I'm getting an idea here of how much processor speed we would probably want. Maybe, what would you say the minimum system requirements should be to run a modern server? And additionally, how about bandwidth requirements?
Okay, so to run a modern server, to be able to keep up with downloading and uploading all the time, and, you know, large amounts of read and write processing for things like Minecraft or whatever, I definitely recommend, you know, a minimum of 2 gig of RAM and at least a 3.2 gigahertz processor. You'd probably be able to get away with a 2.8, but a 3 point something would be definitely better for obvious reasons. The Raspberry Pi would host a L.A.M.P server with very little issue, but like I say, once you get into the point where you're getting large amounts of hits, your processing power and RAM usage is going to go quite high. There was one other question there, Spatry, and I've forgotten it. What was it? Sorry.
I think you actually answered all of the questions, and I think it was bandwidth. Now, that I wanted to cover because, for instance, somebody like me, I'm using Xfinity Internet, and part of their agreement is that you're not supposed to use your home internet connection as a server, and that sort of thing. But most importantly, what kind of bandwidth would you recommend to somebody like me who, let's say I just want to have my own page. Okay, I've got an old computer that I've got set up. It's got a 2 gigahertz processor. It's got 2 gigs of RAM. Would this be something sufficient for me to launch my own website and that sort of thing? I've got cupoflinux.com, and just having that point to the IP address that is assigned and that sort of thing from my ISP, would that be something that would be sufficient, or are you suggesting that I have something a little bit faster?
No, that should be perfectly fine to run it, and I'm pretty sure most ISPs will have some sort of term or condition that says you can't run servers off their off a home internet connection, and a lot of people misconceive that as you're not allowed to run a server full stop, which is not true. 95% of the time it's not true. What they're talking about in those sorts of things are high-end servers and, you know, very large farms, or even, not so much very large farms, but, you know, something that's getting smashed a lot. So like a website that's doing, that's got, you know, 6 or 7 servers running it, and, you know, you're pulling in 5 or 6 million hits an hour or something like that, like the Pirate Bay or something like that. You know, that'd be what they're against, because it is a home connection, and everyone else that uses the home connection on your exchanges suffer because of that traffic. As far as bandwidth goes, depending on what you want to do, So just hosting, cupoflinux.com, saying you get maybe 300 hits a day, because HTML is pretty much just plain text being sent via the internet. Your browser's what renders it and makes it look pretty, but and depending on how many images you've got and stuff like that inside the HTML, and whether the images are hosted on your server or something like PhotoBucket or Imgur or something like that, would depend on how much bandwidth you're going to use. But say you've got a one-page website that has, just a cup of Linux, and you put each week's video on there that's hosted on YouTube, and it's got one picture that's 1 megabyte, and the video is hosted away from your website, so that doesn't affect your bandwidth. So the text inside the HTML document is probably only about 100 kilobytes. So there's 1.1 megabyte for your entire website. You take 300 hits a day, that's or just under 330 megabytes, I think, something like that. So if you've got somewhere along the lines of 200, 300, 400 gigabytes bandwidth per month, you're gonna make it very easy to run that service. But that's not including your normal usage for things like game, Facebook, and all that sort of stuff. But they don't use a great deal of bandwidth either. But you've got to be kind of smart about what you put into a home-hosted website based on what type of bandwidth you're getting. So I definitely wouldn't recommend running an Arch mirror off a 200 gig connection, or a Ubuntu mirror off a 200 gig connection like I do, because I'm spastic. But you get my point. Like it really, really kills your bandwidth, and it really does it really quick if you start going too big.
I gotcha. Okay, now Oscalit went on to say that the configuration settings that I was suggesting would be okay, but speaking about the ISP situation is the data throughput that your connection takes. And he also went on to say that if I were utilizing too much bandwidth, then they would probably talk to me about upgrading my internet package. And if I were to actually decide to take one of these old computers and set up a server, obviously I would actually use a business class account rather than a home account. Now, you also went on to mention, and I wanted to move on to your next topic before the next thing, you've made a contribution to the Arch community, and you actually have an AUR server. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so as far as the actual server goes, I have it. I have every single PKG build on the AUR. The problem is that I don't have the bandwidth to build every single PKG build on the AUR. So what I'm doing at the moment is I'm filtering through all of the PKG builds that I do have, and picking out what seem to be the most popular via the comments on each package and whatnot. So, pardon me. I'm going through and sorting through all the PKG builds to be able to build these things. The other really complicated thing about it is there is no easy way to automate the downloading of all of these PKG builds. I've got that bit sorted, but the other complication on top of that is building them so that, you build one PKG build, and when that's done, it moves on to the next one, so on and so forth. You have to create quite complex bash wrappers to be able to complete that sort of process, and at the moment I just don't have time to write it. The other thing, like I say, is when I start building these things, I've also got to be very mindful of my bandwidth as well, because I've got obviously the full Arch mirror here, and I've also got to worry about the downloading of the source for all of these PKG builds, and then obviously the redistributing the packages that have been built back out onto the internet via the repo. So at the moment it looks like I'm going to have to put that one on a staller until I can afford some dedicated hosting with some good bandwidth and hard drive space to be able to do that minus a few of the really, really popular packages, and people are more than welcome to suggest packages to me.
So basically, in layman's terms, for those of you who are not understanding what Setkeh is doing here, is he's actually placed pre-compiled packages, I'm guessing, into his AUR. And basically, this allows you to download these and install these without actually having to compile all of these packages on the fly. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. Now, Techman has something he would like to add.
Thanks, you, Spatry. I am hosting an FTP server off of my internet connection, and it is a private FTP server. I have it set to where if you want a connection to it, I have to set you up a user account, and you get a username and password, and you type in FTP:// and then the IP address, and it is running off of a 1.5 megs per second download and a 0.5 megs per second upload on an old machine with a 1.86 gigahertz processor and 2 gigs of RAM, and is running all right.
All right, so any hardware that I'd have lying around right now at this point would be sufficient for running a server then, according to what you're telling me there.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay, well, let's go ahead and move on to the next topic. And this one should be of interest to a number of you people. And this one comes to us hot from the press on the Muktiware website. And this is Motorola gets Windows 7 Xbox banned in Germany. Let me read this article to you. I couldn't believe it when I read this. Microsoft has now tasted its own bitter pill as Motorola has succeeded in getting its Xbox and Windows 7 banned in Germany. U.S. International Trade Commission last month issued a preliminary ruling that Microsoft's Xbox 360 infringes on 4 Motorola patents. Microsoft may face ban on Xbox 360 in the U.S. as well. The final ruling is expected later this year. When Microsoft has played bluff until now, settling cases outside the court, which also indicates that its patent attack on Android is bogus, Motorola is actually succeeded in winning the legal rounds on the basis of its patents. Now, interestingly enough, this article goes on to say later on that Microsoft is running a kind of extortion racket attacking Android players to sign deals over undisclosed and bogus patents. Microsoft settled its lawsuit against Barnes & Noble, fearing its certain defeat. The company paid Barnes & Noble $3 million and called it investment so that it can continue its attack on Android. These rulings in favor of Android should weaken Microsoft's attack on Android as its mobile platform has failed. Okay, very interesting topic here, and you know, if this succeeds and they're actually able to ban Microsoft in Germany, it just raises a question in my mind. How many other countries may follow suit on this? And we had a really interesting pre-show discussion on this, and there were a lot of different things that were said, and the funniest thing that was said was from Total OS Today. Take it away.
First of all, my son, what did my son say? Something like, if they really banned the Xbox here in the States, well, I said if this happens, I'm moving to Canada. And then my son says something like, then the real black ops of the U.S. have to unite to prevent this. I'm saying, from my point of view, Halo users around the world have to unite. And finally, boo, Germany. No, I'm just kidding. I love Germany. But this sounds so surreal. Like the world? Okay, Germany banned Microsoft because of some legal legal issues. But first Germany, then the world? I mean, wow.
Well, like I said before, if they start banning it in like America and stuff, you're going to find that they're going to lose a lot of money, especially Microsoft, about all these Xbox Live subscriptions, and people on YouTube are going to be thinking, oh, what am I going to do now? I can't upload any videos from Xbox Live and all that lot of stuff, so people won't be actively engaging for like Mishima and stuff. At the moment, I think it's just going to stay in Germany if it actually gets passed, but I don't think the US will have it as well, because I don't think they'll go down lightly.
All right, and Riley on IRC said he is going to sell any Microsoft stock right now. You don't have stock in Microsoft, do you? Pingcast, you're next.
It's just the sale of it, right? So, if you have an existing Xbox, you should still be able to use that, right?
I imagine you still would be able to use that, yes.
As people were saying there, in America, Microsoft not being able to sell their products in America, I don't see that ever happening. First off, it's an American-based company, and I'm pretty sure the American government likes the tax they receive off that company, because as I recall, at one stage, Bill Gates was the richest man in the world, so I'm pretty sure his company paid a hefty tax to the American government, and they have to fund their armies and all that somehow. They have to fund the Black Ops to stop it,
QUIDSUP.
I do like this bit of news because for too long Microsoft have hidden behind their patents as a way of moving their operating system forward. They haven't done new technologies, new ideas to the extent of other companies. Instead, they've hidden behind their patents and attacked other companies that way. And now it's backfired a good one. So yeah, I do like that. It's quite amusing.
Two things. First, Quids, I thought I liked you. No, I really don't. I'm just kidding. Well, all I can say is that if it really happened here, which it probably won't, I cannot live without my Halo games. It's probably the one game I play all the time. So
Even if Xbox does get banned in the United States, or any other country for that matter, you've already got your Xbox. When they rule against patents, infringements and things like that, they don't stop them from being able to use them, they just fine them and make them pay out the company X amount of dollars or X amount of billions of dollars. So I don't think that the impact will be all that massive because Microsoft can afford it. So the Xbox itself and the Xbox Live media will still more than likely exist. They probably won't be able to expand on it, or they will have to completely redesign it so that it doesn't infringe these patents after the fines and payouts are all completed.
Unless Microsoft are going to gain any money from it, then I don't see why they'd do it. But maybe they might end up just cancelling any future subscriptions to Xbox Live or future sales of Xboxes or all. But like you say, they're gaining a lot of money and they're going to be benefiting from it if it continues to sell. If they don't, then they're just going to start losing money. And they're going to come out with something stupid.
In my opinion, Microsoft won't lose too much by this issue of Xbox being banned in Germany. They have products all over the world in a lot of other countries, so this is just going to be a small dent in their budget, in my opinion.
Yeah, this is probably a good example where, unless there's some absolutely blatant disregard for some kind of, specific patent, I think companies need to somehow figure out a way to play nice. Play seriously if you have to, but play nice. It's a small world. It's a global economy. And maybe companies, long term, maybe they need each other somehow, some way to survive and prosper. So, what happened in Germany probably is a taste, Microsoft getting a taste of their own medicine, probably deservedly so. But it's a little bit surprising. But hey, I understand companies wanting to protect what's theirs, but think long term, think what's good for the consumer. And maybe somehow balance what's best for the consumer, balance that in the interest of also, being profitable, if that makes any sense.
Now, could this be Microsoft's undoing? I have no idea. Is Microsoft slowly dying? I mean, obviously, they're not gaining any foothold in the mobile markets right now. They've completely lost that. Android has a majority of the market share, it is my understanding at this time. Could this eventually lead to an end of software patents? Maybe that's something that is needed so that there is more innovation, because right now patents actually prevent innovation. If I wanted to create a piece of software of my own today, Okay, obviously, let's say I just want to make a graphics program or a video editing software, all right, and I don't have a degree in software patents. Obviously, I'm going to be including technologies in my video editing software that I'm designing that's going to step over somebody else's patent, and then legally they can take me to court and, you know, sue me out of all my money and, you know, prevent me from releasing something that's going to help people, you know, and so really, I think that doing away with software patents is really going to help innovation in more ways than I can think of.
I don't think there is an easy solution, is there, Spatry?
I don't think there is right now, but the thing is, all these little tidbits that we're seeing in the news today, it's just a sign of the times. Eventually, you know, a system that doesn't work is eventually going to crumble, and we may be seeing the birth pains of that happening right now.
Well, it was said years ago, not that long ago, you know, that we are the modern Roman Empire. And of course, you know what happened to the real Roman Empire. I hope that's not the case, but yeah.
As a great quote goes, Rome wasn't built in a day. There is still room for improvement in our empire. I can see the light. Well, at least I have to try and see the light. But there is a light out there. Microsoft feels that's a light to me anyway.
I think Microsoft is making a huge mistake. I mean, in the way of making profits, because people use Windows quite a lot. It probably has, I think it has the biggest market share in the PC world. So if they quit marketing it, if they quit marketing all of their products in one country, it's just gonna downfall in their way of profits.
Let me toss out some quick historical names real quick. Napoleon, or Caesar, Napoleon, Hitler. You know, there is an underlying human defect that, even though we can learn from history, there is an inherent human defect that simply does not want to go away. And that's like when people or a single person or people are in a position of power, they want it all. And history has proven that you can't have it all. It's impossible, but yet powers that be will try, and ultimately they will fail. And maybe they may take some of us with them. That's the part I don't like, but you know, not to get too philosophical here, but there is again that, you know, annoying human defect of ultimate power.
And empires that rise eventually fall. All right, gang. Well, I will say this has been a wonderful discussion, but before I finish this off, I do want to mention that Riley believes, and I subscribe to this view, that the GNU public license is a wonderful solution, and I think that we should start seeing more software developers embracing this. Sharing ideas for the benefit of one another, because when everybody shares, everybody benefits. I think that's great, you know, that that people are out there sharing. That is what the spirit of Ubuntu is, you know. So lots of good things that I've heard today on the show. I really appreciate everybody for being here. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. I'm going to go ahead and pass the microphone over to Pingcasts, who will take us out.
Alright, thanks for watching, everyone, and that was an attack of the Linux show host. I really hope you enjoyed it, and stay tuned for another one.
All right, thank you, all of you, for listening. Thank you to everybody in the studio here, Edward 12, Oscalit, Pingcasts, QUIDSUP, Setkeh, Techman, the Linux Guy, and Total OS Today. Thank you, all of you in the listening room, everybody who participated on IRC, and most importantly, thank all of you on YouTube at home who is listening to this show. Please be sure to check out all of the shows that will be listed in the show notes. Every one of them is well worth your time. Check us out next Saturday night. We will have another Linux Zoo crew headed your way with more great topics.
Today's show was brought to you by the Linux Distro Community. Visit us today at linuxdistrocommunity.com and chat with us on Mumble or in IRC on the Freenode network in the Linux Distro Community channel. The Linux Distro Community. Freedom through the sharing of knowledge.